Welcome back to another entry in my quest to replay and review all the AC games in the series. We last did Black Flag all the way back in January, and this is more than overdue, but finally we're getting to what has, in my opinion at least, always been a very underrated game in the series, Assassin's Creed Rogue. I'd also like to apologize for my lack of videos over the past week or so. I took my first real vacation ever since I started my channel, but anyways, I'm back now, so thank you for your patience. Now please let me know what you think of AC Rogue in the comments, because I always see some really interesting opinions on this game. And as for my channel, I don't really talk about Rogue all that much, and that's because I was saving a lot of my opinion on it for this video and to fully replay the game to refresh my memory a little. But really the main reason why Rogue wasn't too successful when it came out and wasn't really talked about much was because of the stupidity behind Ubisoft's decision to release two Assassin's Creed games on not only the same year, but the same day. And obviously AC Unity was the new next-gen game with crazy graphics and next-gen features and gameplay that had everybody really excited, while Rogue was for those who weren't cool enough to make the leap to next-gen consoles at the time. And it essentially looked like a reskinned Black Flag to a lot of people. Well, joke's on them, because you were probably better off if you were stuck playing Rogue instead of Unity on launch anyway, because of all the issues and bugs with Unity. Today, it's a different story of course, but Rogue was definitely a more polished game than Unity at the time, and that's mostly because it doesn't change much at all from Black Flag. There's some nice new changes from Black Flag, nothing major. However, there are still improvements that I'll touch on later, but I want to touch on what I consider AC Rogue's biggest strength, its story.
I make my own luck. Liam.
The main draw to this game was playing as a Templar and killing assassins as Shay Cormac. Of course, no game before or even to this day afterwards has done that, and the flip in perspective was really unique and refreshing. The conflict between Templars and assassins was always so one-sided because we always played as the assassins. Meanwhile, the Templars were always these eccentric, evil people who wanted to control the world. However, some of the games in the series played around with the idea that the Templars aren't so evil after all, or specific Templars weren't bad at all. It was shown a little in AC1 with Robert de Sable, and most notably with Haytham Kenway in Assassin's Creed 3, who many sided with over the protagonist Connor. So Rogue is really the first game to fully embrace the idea that there is no right or wrong in this conflict. Just like real life, it's not as simple as the Templars are bad and the assassins are good. And what I love about Rogue is that it doesn't simply just flip it and say Templars are good and assassins are bad. That would be really lame. Instead, it shows you why both sides are the way they are and why they do the things they do. I think the whole point is you're not really meant to take a side, but to realize there's no good or evil in this conflict. Of course, that's not always true because, again, it does rely on certain people. There are bad people in the assassins and bad people in the Templars and vice versa. Rogue did an excellent job of adding layers to this conflict that once felt very two-dimensional. And I think this is portrayed perfectly through the game's protagonist, Shay Patrick Cormac. Shay is originally an assassin. At first, he feels like every other assassin protagonist we've played as in this series, and I'm really happy they had him start out as an assassin, as we finally have a character that has been on both sides of the conflicts and understands what each creed or order wants and their methods. Even though Shay eventually stands by the Templars, it's not like he thinks the assassins are evil. In fact, he still believes in a lot of what they strive for, but Achilles' Brotherhood during this time period is incredibly naive and clueless and decides to mess with things they don't understand. Of course, I'm referring to the precursor boxes that have the potential to destroy cities if they are removed. Shay's goal here is not to kill all the assassins out of revenge or because he doesn't believe in what they stand for or anything. He's doing this to stop them from making a huge mistake and killing thousands of innocent people. The assassins aren't evil and Shay knows this, they're just hopelessly misguided. I think if Shay was part of the assassins in a different time period, or if Achilles was slightly less hard-headed and naive, he never would have turned. Something else I really love about this story and the characters that wasn't ever really stated by Ubisoft is it's essentially a prequel to the story of Assassin's Creed 3. The story of Rogue actually makes AC3 so much better, and it kind of makes me wish people had played Rogue before AC3. It really helps you understand the premise and history of AC3, why Achilles is alone and broken, why the assassins are practically non-existent, and how characters characters like Haytham Kenway got to where they were. It makes Connor a more interesting character to me because it really clarifies that he's Achilles' redemption. Connor is the one who restores the assassins to what they should be and not hopelessly naive and misguided like how they were with Achilles during Rogue's story. Having Haytham and Achilles be such key players in Rogue's story allows you to understand the history and context there in AC3. I believe Rogue was actually meant to have Haytham Kenway as the protagonist originally, but either way, I'm glad we got to see a lot of him in the game, as he's easily one of, if not my favorite character in the whole series. Plus, we get a really interesting character like Shay as well, who has quite a lot in common with Haytham in terms of their assassin roots. As of course, Haytham is the son of Edward Kenway.
Shut your fucking gob or I'll fill it with shot, you hear me?
I wish Ubisoft planned this a little better. It feels like we got the story completely out of order. It should have been Black Flag as AC3, then Rogue would be AC4, and AC3 would be AC5. Instead, we got the story completely out of order, so I don't think it really hits quite as hard as it's supposed to. And of course, casual players aren't going to understand that really all three of these games are connected. Then of course, this game even connects to Unity with the occasional 20-year time skip to France. So a really missed opportunity to have all these games' stories connect and flow through one another. But oh well, I still really enjoy it regardless. Rogue also has some really great characters aside from those we know already, and Shay of course, who has one of the coolest voices ever, by the way.
My name is Shay Patrick Cormac. This is my story.
Almost all the Templars in this game are really likable. Colonel Monroe is a great character who helps and guides Shay when he's lost and broken after his betrayal of the assassins, and he's a character that really further reinforces the point that there are good and truly kind Templars who want to help the world. Then you see what the assassins do and you suddenly see them in a different light. Christopher Gist, your first mate, is an example of another Templar who would normally be one of your targets in this game, but actually becomes one of your closest friends and allies. The assassin characters are good as well, specifically Hope and Liam, who Shay considers genuine friends, which makes it all the more sad and painful when you have no choice but to hunt them down and fight them. You can see Shay's remorse and extreme guilt as he hunts down his former friends and colleagues, which is really important because they could have easily made Shay a really unlikable protagonist if he just killed all his old friends out of hatred or revenge. However, you can see that it gives him absolutely no pleasure. It's the opposite, and he's constantly having to battle internally if what he's doing is right and if it's worth it to save the world. I love how the game incorporated Adewale as well, Edward's first mate from Black Flag and the protagonist of Freedom Cry.
I'm Edward. Much thanks for your aid back there.
Adewale.
We know Adewale is a genuinely good person and assassin, and Shay knows it too. This whole conflict is really unfortunate. It's also really cool to know that Achilles and Adewale worked so closely together, and of course hearing Adewale interact with Haytham was really awesome to hear as well, since Adewale was a close friend and trusted ally of Edward's. I really enjoy the occasional time skips in France as well, providing an explanation to where Shay was during the events of AC3, and providing context for the beginning of Unity. It was quite clever writing, especially since Unity and Rogue came out at the same time. I'm also deadly curious what in the world happened after this and after Unity. It feels like this was kind of all building up to one final grand act in the story that we just never got to see. What happened with Connor and Shay? It feels like there should have been one final large battle between the assassins and Templars there. So I don't really know why we never got to see that. That definitely should have been the plot for the game after Unity instead of Syndicate in my opinion. In fact, I was so passionate about this, I literally decided to write the story myself for a game that takes place after Unity with Connor, Shay, Arno, and Avalon. If you want to check that out, I made like a 35-minute video talking about the story I made for that game. It's probably too late to get that story now. After Unity would have been perfect timing, but it is what it is. Guess it was just in the cards for us to get this instead. Now, as for the modern day storyline in Rogue, it's nowhere near as interesting. You're playing as another mute Abstergo employee going through Shay's memories. It's the same first-person style as Black Flag in the same area, even with a few of the same characters. You know, it's vaguely interesting with Otso Berg and everything, but it felt like a pretty forgettable modern day storyline, especially in the grand scheme of things. Nothing ever really came of what happened in it. As I'm sure you know, AC Rogue's gameplay is very similar to Black Flag, with some new additions that help refresh the experience a little bit. The combat system is the same, however Shay uses a sword and dagger combo with some new animations. Stealth is the same as well, same assassination animations, hiding, cover system, whistling, all that. However, Shay does get some nice fancy new tools. You get an air rifle that shoots sleep and berserk darts over long distances, that also shoots firecrackers as a means to lure enemies. You could argue it's just a fancier projectile launcher that doesn't actually add much new. However, it's quicker, more precise, and has a longer range. Plus, it just looks really cool. Another very useful new weapon is the grenade launcher. You can shoot sleep, berserk, and shrapnel grenades, which instead of it just being a small dart, it's a grenade that causes an area attack so you can affect multiple enemies with one grenade, whether it's knocking them all out with a sleep grenade or blowing them to kingdom come with a shrapnel grenade. Then of course you have your usual tools from the previous games, dual wielding pistols, smoke bombs, rope dart, being able to throw money as a lure. Again, everything is very similar with some minor changes and a few new helpful additions, one of which is the new enemy type, which in my opinion is probably the best enemy type in the series, the assassin stalkers. Of course, since we are now playing as a Templar, you're fighting assassins. It's almost like playing against yourself because all the assassin stalkers do what we do. They hide in bushes, on rooftops, or in crowds. They strike from the shadows with a hidden blade. You have to constantly be aware and ready for them, otherwise you can get killed pretty quickly. There's a little whisper sound effect that plays when you're nearby, and your screen turns a little pink, signaling there's a stalker in the area. You can find them with eagle vision and outstalk the stalkers by striking them when they think they're hidden from your view. The stalkers are some really awesome enemy types and completely unique to AC Rogue. Of course, just like Black Flag, Rogue has a pretty big emphasis on naval combat, which is the last AC game to have it for a while until those sections in AC Origins. However, the naval combat for me at this point was getting a little old, especially since it's so similar to Black Flag with once again a few minor changes. The whole sailing and boarding process is exactly the same. However, now your ship, the Morrigan, gets puckle guns instead of swivels, which are a nice improvement as they are automatic, and instead of the fire barrels, you get burning oil, which I found to be far more useful and effective as you blaze a path of fire in your stead. There were a couple small minor new additions I really liked as well, like actually being able to charge with your ship when you're aiming in the front. It makes ramming actually feel more useful and powerful, and the extra speed boost allows you to outmaneuver ships, especially those annoyingly strong legendary ships. Another nice small feature is your ship can actually be boarded by the AI now when they ram into the side of your ship and you have to defend it from the invading enemies. The naval combat was definitely repetitive for me at this point, especially after playing Black Flag and Freedom Cry, but some of the smaller additions and changes were appreciated. And of course, just like Black Flag, you can upgrade all the different parts of the Morrigan and change its appearance, although there's not quite as many options or available upgrades as there were in Black Flag. This goes for the outfits too, which there's still a decent amount of in Rogue, some of which look very cool and also unique since you're a Templar. I really like the Assassin Hunter outfit. That one looks really sick, and I like the white and red Templar Master outfit you get for defeating all the legendary ships, although I'm not quite sure if that's a substantial enough reward for dealing with those things. Again, not quite as much customization as there was in Black Flag, but there's still some really cool outfits you can unlock from either purchasing them, finding collectibles, or completing mission threads. You can craft upgrades for better health or increased capacity for all your different tools, which you craft with animal skins and bones. Again, exactly like Black Flag. Parkour is also pretty much the same as Black Flag. Not to say it's bad or anything, but it would have been nice to at least get some new animations because it does get a little old, especially when you play the game so close back to back like I did. The gameplay in the modern day is pretty boring, no action. It's just pressing a few buttons, fixing servers, and solving a couple simple puzzles. Like I've said from the beginning, the gameplay is still very similar to Black Flag and feels copied and pasted in lots of areas. With that said, there's a few new additions and little changes that I really like and help distinguish it a little bit, like the Assassin Stalkers, for example. Maybe if Ubisoft wasn't working on, I don't know, 2 games at the same time, we could have gotten some new gameplay for Rogue. Because pair some new fun gameplay with that story and ooh, I think Rogue would be considerably better and more favored by the community. Not to say the gameplay is bad, I mean I love Black Flag, but it definitely gets repetitive. As for Rogue's open world, I actually quite like the idea of the setting, during the 7 Years' War, and getting to see the Davenport homestead. However, the open world itself feels quite bland, especially in comparison to Black Flag, which I'm sorry for bringing it up so much, but I kind of have to when the games are so similar, and it makes for a good reference point. Rogue's world feels a lot more linear, whilst Black Flag's felt very open and freeing. And I don't think being more linear is always a bad thing by any means, but the gameplay is supposed to be built around the more open style of world, especially with the naval combat. In Black Flag, there's lots of blue, open sea, islands, and tons of different cities, while Rogue is a lot more confined, and there isn't even close to as much to check out or explore. It's smaller and it has less to offer. Visually, it's also not as colorful or as exciting as the Caribbean either. The main cities like New York and Albany are immersive though, with lots of civilian NPCs and the bustling life of the city. I kind of wish we could have spent a little more time in Lisbon, because that's a really unique location for the series and would have been fun to explore, but the precursor box had other things in mind, I guess. As for activities and side missions, there's a decent amount, still not as much as Black Flag of course. All in all, Rogue is about half the length of AC4, but I still enjoyed some of the side content. The legendary ship battles were really challenging naval boss fights, which were quite enjoyable. Again, I do wish I got better rewards for it other than some coins and an outfit, considering how challenging they were, especially that last one. The assassin interceptions are new rather than the usual assassination contracts. This time you're the one intercepting the contract and killing the assassins before they can take out their target. I like how it fits the Templar theme and goes well with the story, but it gets pretty repetitive after you do it a couple times. There are French outposts you can infiltrate and liberate different cities from, the gang headquarters where you have to usually take out a few targets and the assassin leader, then cut down a flag. Those were pretty fun. Again though, like with all of these, there's not much variety at all. You're basically doing the same thing over and over. Just like AC4, there are forts where you have to destroy towers, then attack on land and kill specific targets. Settlements are sort of similar to the outposts, where you need to liberate a small area by killing a few snipers. There's also taverns where you can get some important information or locations on the map by going in and beating up a couple of guys in a bar fight. Hate to sound like a broken record, but again, it gets very repetitive. It even plays the same cutscene every time. You can harpoon sea creatures just like AC4, as well as the naval campaign where you can partake in little ship battle mini games and send your fleet on trade routes to earn money. I do like the economy system in Rogue, where you can renovate buildings and liberate areas to increase the income in your bank. It's nothing new or unique for the series, but I enjoy this kind of system in AC games. There's a little board game you can play in the taverns, which I could not beat the stupid AI to save my life. Visually, Rogue holds up pretty well for a last gen game, or I guess 2 generations ago now. It looks good. Obviously nowhere near as good as Unity, which is a big reason why a lot of people chose to get Unity over Rogue, but it's by no means bad looking. It's not as vibrant or scenic as Black Flag either though, in my opinion. It definitely looks a little dull sometimes. However, this game has a great soundtrack. I love this version of Ezio's Family. The music is very dark and eerie sometimes. I think it fits the game very well. Again, I think the main draw of Assassin's Creed Rogue is its story and getting to play as a Templar and see the conflict fleshed out significantly more. Honestly, Shay Cormac is probably up there with some of my favorite protagonists of the series, and he's extremely underrated in my opinion. In fact, Rogue as a whole is quite underrated. The gameplay and everything can be very repetitive and is just like Black Flag in a lot of ways, but there's still a few new things, and again, that story is really my favorite part about the game. It's by no means innovative or a huge breath of fresh air in terms of gameplay for the series, and if you're tired of the Black Flag formula, I can see why some people may not like it, but I still enjoy the gameplay even if it gets old sometimes, and the story alone and how it connects to AC3 and Unity makes it worth experiencing in my opinion, so I definitely recommend Assassin's Creed Rogue in 2022. It's a game that's really cheap and goes on sale quite a lot, so I'm sure you can get it for a great price if you don't own it already. But that concludes my opinion on AC Rogue. I want to hear what you guys think of the game if you've played it already, because it's not talked about that much. It's kind of the dark horse of the series in many ways, and if you haven't played it yet, let me know if this video was helpful in your decision to check it out. I make a lot of Assassin's Creed videos here, so if you're new, consider subscribing. That would really help me out. I appreciate you all. We will be replaying and reviewing Unity as the next game in the series. That should be really fun. But thanks for all the support and have a good rest of your day. And don't forget, I make my own luck.
Liam.